first verse. Cruel is the snow that sweeps Glencoe and covers the grave of Donald. Oh, cruel was the foe that raped Glencoe and murdered the house of MacDonald. I'm sure you've heard it. I'm going to start off with a description of the massacre, and then I'm going to put it in a historical context and go into some detail. The rudiments are actually well known, but I'm going to give it a little color because we have, thanks to the fact that the soldiers of Argyll's regiment that perpetrated the massacre retired to, that is, pulled back to Edinburgh days after the massacre. And the news did not get out of the massacre. The first printed version of it was from a Jacobite newspaper in Paris. And that would be a supreme collector's item, because that is the first printed news of the massacre of Glencoe. And it was because of that coming in from France that a man by the name of Lane went up to Edinburgh, found the soldiers that did the deed in their barracks, and interviewed them over a period of many days. And you know, truth emerges from multiple sources. And so by talking to each of these soldiers and getting their version of it, he was able to put names to all the deeds and everything. And it's only because of this assiduous reporter that we really have all the details that we do have of the massacre of Glencoe, which I'm going to describe to you. The reason I can describe it in such vivid detail is thanks to John Lane and his reportage from the day. Now, the Argyll regiment. Now, when I say, I've got to clarify here, I'm going to use a lot of terms that we just know. Argyll is Campbell. There's just no separating the two. You know, it's like hearing Glengarry, where if certain familiar names, you don't have to say them. You just say their nickname. And Argyll is the Duke of Argyll, who raised a regiment for the king, for King William III, the new Protestant king of England, at his own expense. Years later only would he be paid for it. Those men were commanded to carry out the massacre I'm going to describe. And I want to dispel one notion right off. You know, the popular version of this is Campbell killing MacDonald. And that's the end of it. But it really wasn't that at all. We're used in the Highlands to internecine battles between clans. And yes, you can say MacLeods killed MacDonalds and so on. And there's some terrible stories we all know. However, this was a case where the Duke of Argyll's regiment had very few Campbells in it. And most of the names in that regiment of the people that actually murdered the MacDonalds are names from Yorkshire and from England and from the lowlands of Scotland, and a few Highland names and a few Campbells in there, but none, they're not the majority by any means. But I'll bring in the Campbell connection later. They're quartered, briefly, they're quartered for 2 weeks in the valley of Glencoe. And they're there under Highland hospitality and the ancient rules of that behavior. And after 2 weeks of cordial, convivial relations, where they're living with families and they're dining with them and they're telling stories back and forth, and they're playing cards every night, and people are inviting each other over to have ceilidhs and so on. The order comes from Fort William, which is really 20 miles away. The order comes from Fort William to conduct the massacre.